The grand chamber of the Galactic Tribunal towered like a cathedral of glass and light, its transparent walls revealing the endless sea of stars beyond. At its center stood James Miller, his broad shoulders straight and his head held high despite the chains that bound his wrists. He looked small against the massive architecture, but there was something in his stance that made the alien judges shift uncomfortably in their elevated seats. The chief judge, a tall, willowy creature with silver skin, leaned forward to examine the human before them. Unlike the other aliens present, who kept their distance from James, as if he might explode at any moment, the chief judge showed only curiosity. James Miller of Earth, the chief judge's voice echoed through the chamber, translated perfectly into standard galactic common. You stand accused of excessive violence, disturbing galactic peace, and causing widespread panic among the citizens of Greenhaven Colony. How do you explain your actions? James took a deep breath before speaking. I defended innocent people from pirates. That's all there is to explain. Murmurs rippled through the watching crowd. The evidence screens around the chamber flickered to life, showing footage from the colony's security systems. The images displayed James, armed with nothing but basic mining tools, systematically dismantling a group of well-armed pirates who had attacked the peaceful farming settlement. You killed 12 armed attackers, stated another judge, this one a floating orb of pure energy, with mining equipment. They had guns. I had a pickaxe and a drilling laser, James replied calmly. They chose to attack civilians. I chose to stop them. The chief judge's assistant, a small creature with large eyes and trembling hands, quickly interjected, but the level of violence. The footage shows you fighting in twice normal gravity without an enhancement suit. You broke through reinforced doors. You survived a toxic gas attack without protection. James shrugged. I'm from Earth. We call that Tuesday. The statement sent another wave of unease through the chamber. Earth, the mysterious Deathworld that had recently joined the Galactic Alliance, a planet of high gravity, extreme weather, and countless natural disasters. A world that had somehow produced a species that not only survived, but thrived in conditions that would kill most sentient beings. The judges conferred among themselves, their translator devices switching off to ensure privacy. James stood patiently, watching the stars through the chamber walls. He noticed how the other aliens in the room kept glancing at him, a mixture of fear and fascination in their various types of eyes. Finally, the chief judge raised a hand for silence. James Miller, this tribunal has reviewed your case extensively. While we acknowledge that your intentions may have been protective, your actions reveal a disturbing truth. Humans are far more dangerous than we initially assessed. We're not dangerous, James countered. We're protective. There's a difference. A single human with mining equipment defeated 12 armed pirates. The energy-form judge pulsed brightly. You broke their bones with your bare hands. The medical reports show you continued fighting with 3 broken ribs and a punctured lung. This is not normal behavior. It is for us, James said quietly. When people we care about are in danger, humans don't stop. We can't stop. It's not in our nature. The chief judge stood, towering nearly 12 feet tall. And that is precisely what concerns this tribunal. Your species' capacity for violence, combined with your extraordinary physical capabilities and what you call protective instincts, makes you a potential threat to galactic peace. James felt his heart sink. He could see where this was heading, and from the growing tension in the room, so could everyone else. Therefore, the chief judge continued, this tribunal must make an example. We must show the galaxy what happens when someone, even with supposedly good intentions, disrupts the peace we have maintained for 10,000 years. The chamber fell silent as the chief judge raised both hands, preparing to deliver the sentence. James stood straighter, jaw set, ready to face whatever punishment they deemed appropriate for the crime of saving innocent lives. Little did the tribunal know, their sentence would set in motion events that would shake the very foundations of their carefully ordered galaxy. The chief judge's voice rang through the chamber like a death bell. After careful consideration, this tribunal has decided on an appropriate punishment for James Miller of Earth. The massive screen surrounding the chamber lit up with images of a planet that made even James pause. Through the swirling purple clouds, he could make out vast mountain ranges with peaks that disappeared into the atmosphere. Oceans of dark liquid churned with massive waves, and the surface glowed with patches of bioluminescent forests. Nexus 9, announced the chief judge, satisfaction evident in their silver-toned voice. A planet that makes your Earth look like a garden world. The energy-form judge pulsed with what might have been excitement. Gravity at 2.4 times Earth standard. Atmospheric pressure, twice that of your world. The very air contains trace elements toxic to most life forms. Even the plant life is carnivorous. James studied the images with growing interest, rather than the fear the judges clearly expected. The assistant judge quickly pulled up more data, their hands shaking as they manipulated the holographic controls. The average surface temperature ranges from 40 to 45 degrees Celsius, the assistant added nervously. Massive electrical storms cover 60% of the surface at any given time. The largest recorded predator stands 15 meters tall. And this, the chief judge declared, will be your new home, James Miller. Permanent exile to Nexus 9. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. Even for a death sentence, this was extreme. No one had ever survived more than a few days on Nexus 9. The planet had claimed the lives of everyone who had ever tried to establish a presence there. James looked at the swirling images of the planet's surface. His expression remained neutral, but his mind was already working through the challenges. High gravity meant stronger bones and muscles would develop. Toxic air suggested his Earth-evolved liver might actually be an advantage. Carnivorous plants. He'd handled worse in Australia. You will be provided with basic survival equipment, the chief judge continued. A shelter kit, 1 month's worth of standard rations, and a basic tool set. After that, you're on your own. How generous, James remarked dryly. When do I leave? His calm response clearly unsettled the judges. They had expected begging, panic, or at least anger. Instead, the human stood there looking almost interested. Transport leaves in 1 hour. The assistant judge stammered. Do you wish to make any final statements for the record? James turned to face the assembled aliens, his chains clinking softly. Just one question. These monitoring drones you'll be using to watch me die. How long will they last? The chief judge's silver skin rippled with what might have been discomfort. The observation drones will function for approximately 1 Earth year, though I doubt we'll need them for more than a few days. Make sure they have good cameras, James said with a slight smile. You're going to want to see this. 2 security guards approached cautiously to escort him out. As they led him toward the doors, the chief judge called out one last time. You seem unusually calm for someone sentenced to death, human. James stopped and turned back. The chamber lights cast his shadow long across the floor, and for a moment, the assembled aliens saw something in his stance that made them remember why their ancestors had feared the dark. Chief Judge, James said quietly, where I come from, we have a saying. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Your people see Nexus 9 as a death sentence. I see it as a challenge. And here's something you should know about humans. We love a good challenge. The doors slid shut behind him, leaving the tribunal in uncomfortable silence. The chief judge sank back into their seat, suddenly unsure if they had given a punishment or an opportunity. One thing was becoming clear. They still didn't understand humans at all. In his holding cell, preparing for transport, James began his mental calculations. High gravity meant starting with small movements. Toxic air meant shallow breaths until his body adapted. Carnivorous plants meant learning the local biology fast. Predators meant finding high ground and making weapons. He smiled to himself. They thought they were sending him to die. Instead, they had just given him a whole new world to conquer. The transport pod broke through Nexus 9's thick purple clouds, plasma flames dancing across its hull. Inside, James braced himself as the pod's AI announced their descent. The gravity was already pulling at him like a giant hand, making each breath feel like a workout. Landing in 5 minutes, the AI's emotionless voice announced. Survival package will deploy upon landing. Warning: external temperature 43 degrees Celsius. Atmospheric toxicity levels extreme. James checked his equipment one last time. The generous survival kit from the Tribunal included a basic pressure tent, water purifier, and some tools that looked like they were designed for children. He had spent the journey studying the planet's data, memorizing what little information the galactic database had about Nexus 9. The pod shuddered violently as it hit a particularly rough air pocket. Through the small window, James caught glimpses of the landscape below. Massive trees with glowing blue leaves stretched toward the purple sky. Something huge moved through their branches, but the pod was dropping too fast for him to get a good look. Landing zone identified, the AI announced. Warning: large life forms detected in vicinity. Recommended course of action: immediate shelter deployment. James smiled grimly. Noted. The pod slammed into the ground with enough force to crack its outer shell, designed to break apart on impact. As the panels fell away, the full weight of Nexus 9's gravity hit James like a truck. He fell to his knees, his muscles screaming in protest. The air was thick, hot, and had a metallic taste that burned his throat. Above him, the monitoring drones deployed from the pod's remains, spreading out to capture every moment of what the Tribunal expected to be his quick death. James ignored them, focusing instead on controlling his breathing. In, out shallow breaths. His Earth-evolved lungs gradually began to adapt to the toxic atmosphere. A deep roar echoed through the forest, closer than he would have liked. James forced himself to his feet, fighting against the crushing gravity. Each movement was deliberate, calculated. He had trained in high-gravity chambers back on Earth. But this was different. This was real. The survival tent practically assembled itself, a small dome of transparent material that was supposedly predator-proof. James quickly moved his supplies inside, then began analyzing his surroundings. The landing zone was a small clearing surrounded by those massive glowing trees. Their trunks were covered in what looked like bioluminescent moss, casting an eerie blue light even in daytime. The ground was black, almost like volcanic glass, and hot to the touch. A movement caught his eye. One of the carnivorous plants the Tribunal had warned him about was growing just at the edge of the clearing. It looked like a cross between a Venus flytrap and a small tree, its leaves gently swaying despite the lack of wind. As he watched, a bird-like creature flew too close. The plant's leaves snapped shut with lightning speed, dragging its prey into what looked like a mouth lined with crystalline teeth. Interesting, James muttered, making mental notes. Fast but predictable movement. Crystal structures might be useful for tools. Another roar, much closer now. Through the trees, he caught glimpses of something big moving toward the clearing. The ground trembled with each step. The monitoring drones buzzed excitedly, positioning themselves for what they assumed would be the violent end of the human experiment. They weren't prepared for what happened next. Instead of cowering in his tent, James began gathering materials. Broken pieces of the pod's hull could make decent shields. Those crystalline plant teeth would work for spear points. The ground's glass-like surface could be shaped into blades. As the massive predator approached the clearing, James felt the old familiar rush of adrenaline. His muscles, already adapting to the gravity, tensed in anticipation. His mind, honed by evolution on humanity's own Deathworld, kicked into high gear. "Come on then," he whispered, testing the weight of his makeshift spear. "Let's show the Tribunal what a human can really do." The drones recorded everything as the monster burst into the clearing, their footage streaming live to the stunned members of the Galactic Tribunal. None of them had expected the human to survive the landing, let alone prepare for battle. They were about to learn their first lesson about humans on Deathworlds. The real fight was just beginning. 2 weeks had passed since James's landing on Nexus 9, and the monitoring drones continued to broadcast footage that left the Galactic Tribunal in stunned disbelief. The first predator that had charged into his landing zone now served as the roof of his expanded shelter, its thick hide proving remarkably waterproof against the planet's acidic rain. James had not only survived the encounter, but had turned the threat into a resource, a concept that seemed to deeply disturb the watching aliens. Inside the newly built shelter, James sorted through his latest discoveries. The toxic blue plants that covered much of the forest had proved to be surprisingly edible after he'd noticed some small animals feeding on fallen leaves. His Earth-evolved liver, designed to handle everything from alcohol to processed food, had little trouble breaking down the mild toxins. Day 15 on Nexus 9. He spoke aloud, knowing the drones were recording. Gravity adaptation is progressing well. Can now move at about 70% normal speed. Muscles are developing to compensate for the increased pressure. He held up a piece of crystalline material harvested from one of the carnivorous plants. These natural crystal formations are actually silicon-based life forms. They conduct electricity when exposed to the planet's frequent storms. Potential for power generation is significant. Outside, the constant purple twilight of Nexus 9's long day cycle cast everything in an ethereal glow. James had learned to track time by watching the bioluminescent patterns of the surrounding forest, which shifted in regular cycles regardless of the constant light. A scratching sound at the shelter's entrance made him smile. "Come on in, girl." A creature about the size of a large dog padded into the shelter. It looked like a cross between a wolf and a lizard, with scales instead of fur and 6 legs instead of 4. James had named her Rex after she'd started following him around 3 days ago. "Brought me another crystal flower, did you?" he asked as the creature dropped a glowing plant at his feet. Her kind were apparently immune to the plant's crystalline teeth, and she quickly learned that James found them useful. The tribunal observers watched in amazement as the predator, a species known for its aggression, curled up next to James like a pet. They had been even more shocked when they realized he had trained several of these creatures to help him hunt and gather materials. "The thing about apex predators," James explained to the drones as he scratched Rex behind her ear scales, "is that they're usually pretty smart. Smart enough to recognize a good partnership when they see one." He stood up, moving easily now despite the crushing gravity, and walked to his workbench, a flat piece of the pod's hull supported by crystalline stems. On it lay his latest project, a crude but effective electrical generator made from the conductive crystal structures and parts salvaged from the pod. "The storms here carry enough charge to power a small city," he continued. "The plants evolved these crystal structures to harvest that energy. Once I figured that out, it was just a matter of copying their design." Rex suddenly lifted her head, all 6 legs tensing. James had learned to trust her instincts. They'd saved his life more than once. He grabbed his spear, now reinforced with crystal shards, and wired to store electrical charge from the storms. A deep rumble shook the ground. Through the hide walls of his shelter, James could see massive shapes moving in the forest. The huge predator he'd first encountered wasn't even close to being the largest thing on Nexus 9. But instead of fear, James felt excitement. Each new challenge had taught him more about surviving on this world. Each adaptation had made him stronger. What the tribunal had intended as a death sentence had become the greatest adventure of his life. "Come on, Rex," he said, checking his weapon and the armor he'd made from crystalline scales. "Let's go see what else this world has to teach us." The drones followed as he stepped out into the alien forest, recording everything for the increasingly worried tribunal. They had sentenced him to die on this Deathworld. Instead, they were watching him master it. And James Miller was just getting started. 1 month into his exile on Nexus 9, James followed Rex deeper into unexplored territory. The 6-legged predator had been acting strangely all morning, leading him away from their usual hunting grounds with unusual persistence. The crushing gravity and toxic air no longer bothered him much. His muscles had grown dense and strong, and his lungs had adapted to filter the poisonous elements. Even the tribunal's drones seemed to have trouble keeping up with his pace now. "What is it, girl?" James asked as Rex stopped suddenly, her scales shifting color to match the glowing vegetation around them. She scratched at the ground, revealing something that didn't look natural. James knelt down and brushed away more of the black soil. His heart rate quickened as he uncovered what appeared to be a metallic surface. Well, what do we have here? Using tools he crafted from crystalline plant teeth, James carefully excavated the area. As more of the structure was revealed, he realized he was looking at some kind of doorway, its surface covered in strange symbols that seemed to pulse with a faint inner light. "This isn't random," he muttered, studying the patterns. The drone zoomed in to capture every detail, broadcasting the discovery back to the increasingly agitated tribunal. "This is language. Someone built this." Rex growled softly, her head tilted as if listening to something James couldn't hear. He'd learned to trust her enhanced senses. Placing his hand on the metal surface, he felt a slight vibration. Something inside was still active. "All this time," James said, his voice filled with wonder, "everyone thought this planet was just a natural death trap. But look at the design of these symbols. They're meant to channel energy, like the crystal plants." He traced one of the glowing patterns. "This isn't a natural formation at all. Someone engineered this entire world." A sudden crack echoed through the forest as the door responded to his touch. Stale air hissed from the opening gap, and lights flickered to life inside the revealed chamber. Rex pressed against James's leg, her scales rippling with nervous colors. "It's okay, girl," he reassured her, readying his spear just in case. "Let's see what secrets this place has been hiding." The chamber beyond the door was surprisingly well preserved. Control panels lined the walls, their surfaces made of the same crystal material he'd been harvesting from the plants. In the center stood what appeared to be a holographic projector. As James approached, the projector hummed to life. A message began playing, translated automatically into various languages. When it reached Galactic Common, James listened intently. "Welcome, survivor," the message began. "If you are receiving this, you have proven yourself capable of adapting to this environment. This facility is one of many research stations established by the precursor civilization. Nexus 9 was designed as a testing ground, a place to develop species capable of surviving extreme conditions." James stared in amazement as the hologram showed images of the planet's construction. The toxic atmosphere, the aggressive wildlife, even the crystal plants, all had been carefully engineered as part of some grand experiment. "The final test begins now," the message continued. "Access to our technology must be earned. Survive for one full planetary cycle, and control of this facility will be yours. But be warned, you are not the first to discover this place. Others will come." The message ended, leaving James standing in the humming chamber. Through the drones, the Galactic Tribunal watched in horror as he began to laugh. "You know what this means?" he asked Rex, who wagged her spiked tail cautiously. "This whole planet is one big training ground. And we just found the instruction manual." Moving to one of the control panels, James began studying the crystal interface. His mind raced with possibilities. With this technology, he could do more than just survive. He could thrive. And if others were coming, well, that just meant he needed to prepare. The tribunal had meant to execute him. Instead, they had given him the keys to a power they didn't even know existed. As James activated another console, bringing up detailed maps of the facility's network, he smiled. The real test was just beginning. 3 months had passed since James discovered the ancient facility. The Galactic Tribunal watched through their drones as their death sentence transformed into something they had never expected. The abandoned research station now hummed with life. James had mastered the crystal technology, using it to build a powerful transmission array. His first broadcast to passing ships had been simple: to all those sentenced to die on Nexus 9, welcome home. They came in broken ships and escape pods, creatures from other Deathworlds, sentenced to the same fate as James. A rock-skinned warrior from a heavy-gravity planet. A pair of methane-breathing engineers whose crime was building unauthorized weapons. A creature of living flame who had scared her own people. James stood at the entrance of the expanded facility, Rex at his side, watching as their newest arrival landed. The drones captured the moment as a massive figure emerged from a battered pod, an 8-foot-tall being with thick armor plates for skin. "Welcome to New Haven," James called out, using the translation crystals he'd adapted from the facility's technology. "I'm James. This is Rex. And you are?" "They called me too dangerous to live among normal people," the armored giant rumbled. "Said this place would kill me." James smiled. "They said the same about all of us. Come on in. We got food, shelter, and work for anyone willing to help build something new here." Inside the facility, the main chamber had been transformed. The crystalline walls pulsed with power harvested from the planet's storms. Maps showed a network of other facilities they'd discovered, each offering new resources and technology. But most impressive was the community they'd built. The rock-skinned warrior had become their security chief, training others to survive the planet's dangers. The methane-breathing engineers had unlocked secrets of the crystal technology that even the precursors hadn't documented. The flame being provided power for their more demanding projects. "The Tribunal thinks they're watching us die," James explained to their new member as they toured the facility. "Instead, they're watching us build a civilization of survivors. Every person they send here makes us stronger." Rex suddenly perked up, her scales flashing warning colors. James checked the security crystals and grinned. "Right on schedule. Want to see something interesting?" They climbed to an observation platform just as one of Nexus 9's massive predators approached the facility. But instead of attacking, the creature gently deposited a load of crystal-rich ore near the entrance. More of its kind followed, each bringing materials needed for the colony's expansion. "We learned to communicate with them using the precursor technology," James explained. "Turns out they're as intelligent as Rex. They're not just animals, they're engineered workers. The whole planet is one big symbiotic system." The armored giant watched in amazement. "And the Tribunal has no idea." "Oh, they're watching." James gestured to the drones hovering nearby. "But they don't understand what they're seeing. They think in terms of punishment and death. We think in terms of opportunity and life." A sudden alert chimed from the control room. One of the methane brothers rushed out, excitement clear in their movements. "James, we found another one." A prison transport carrying 3 Deathworlders just entered the system. "Send them landing coordinates," James ordered, "and prepare more living quarters." He turned to their newest member. "Want to help welcome some more outcasts to their new home?" The giant's armored face split in what might have been a smile. "You're building an army." "No," James corrected. "We're building a future. The Tribunal threw us away, thinking this place would kill us. Instead, it's made us stronger than they could imagine. And soon, they'll have to recognize us as equals." The drones recorded everything, transmitting back to the increasingly concerned Tribunal. They had sentenced a single human to death. Instead, they had given him the means to create something unprecedented. A civilization of survivors, bound together by their shared strength and determination to live. And as James watched another ship descend through Nexus 9's purple clouds, he knew the real revolution was just beginning. The Deathworlders were rising, and the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months after James Miller's exile, the Galactic Tribunal gathered for an emergency session. Their chamber, once a symbol of absolute authority, now seemed smaller somehow as they watched the latest transmissions from Nexus 9. The monitoring drones showed a transformed world. Where there had once been wilderness, a city of crystal and metal now rose into the purple sky. Ships of various designs docked at a spaceport built from salvaged prison transport vessels. The deadly wildlife worked alongside the settlers, carrying materials and protecting the city's borders. The chief judge, their silver skin now dulled with stress, addressed the packed chamber. "We must decide how to respond to this situation." The main screen activated, showing James Miller standing in what had once been the ancient facility's control room. He looked nothing like the prisoner they had sentenced. Months of living in high gravity had transformed him into something more powerful, more dangerous. Rex, now wearing crystal-enhanced armor, stood at his side. "Greetings, Tribunal," James began, his voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "Your year of observation is nearly complete. Now it's time for us to talk about the future." Behind him stood representatives of every species the Tribunal had sentenced to death on Nexus 9. The rock-skinned warrior, the methane-breathing engineers, the being of living flame, the armored giant, all now part of a thriving civilization. "You sent us here to die," James continued. "Instead, we discovered the truth about Nexus 9. This planet wasn't a natural death world. It was a testing ground created by the precursors, a place to develop stronger, more adaptable species. And guess what? Their experiment worked." He gestured to the city visible through the crystal walls. "We've built something unprecedented here. A society of survivors, each bringing their own strengths and knowledge. We've mastered technology you never knew existed. We've turned your death sentence into a new beginning." The tribunal members shifted uncomfortably as James stepped closer to the camera. "So now you have a choice. You can recognize New Haven as an independent world and establish diplomatic relations. Or..." The screen split to show massive crystal structures rising from the planet's surface, weapons platforms utilizing the world's natural energy. The tribunal's military advisors went pale at the readings they were getting. "We don't want conflict," James assured them. "We've had enough of that. What we want is simple. End the practice of sending people here to die. Recognize our sovereignty. And most importantly, acknowledge that coming from a high-gravity world or having enhanced strength doesn't make someone a monster." The chief judge stood. "You're threatening us?" "No," James smiled. "I'm offering you a chance to grow, to move past your fears and prejudices. The precursors built this world to develop species capable of surviving anywhere, doing anything. Imagine what we could accomplish together instead of fighting each other." Rex growled softly, and James patted her armored head. "You thought this planet would kill us. Instead, it made us stronger. You thought we were too dangerous to live among you. Instead, we built our own civilization. Now, you have to decide. Will you keep fighting the inevitable, or will you join us in building a better future?" The chamber erupted in debate, but deep down, they all knew the truth. The tribunal's attempt to eliminate what they feared had instead created something unprecedented. A union of the galaxy's strongest species, led by a human who had turned exile into triumph. "We'll await your response," James concluded. "But remember, we're not asking for permission to exist. We're offering you the opportunity to be part of something extraordinary." The transmission ended, leaving the tribunal to face a changed galaxy. Their perfect order had been disrupted not by violence or rebellion, but by something they had never expected: adaptation, cooperation, and the indomitable will to survive. As the chief judge called for a vote on recognizing New Haven, they finally understood their greatest mistake. They had sentenced a human to die on a death world, forgetting one crucial fact: humans didn't just survive death worlds. They conquered them.